When I was in the world, I had 7 children, a wife, and a business of my own. We were a comfortable family until one cannot pinpoint the moment that I lost my mind. It was not a day, a week, or even a year. Life flames rising, the surges came, the invocations, the orders from the devil, then from God. My determination grew to destroy mankind and so fulfill God's will, reach my apotheosis, and become God himself. The route was strewn with corpses, multitudes imagined, a few real. The first reality was one of my own sons. After that, I began to go steadily downhill, and no longer were we a comfortable family or a family that was whole. I'm Laura. I'm here with my best friend Marina, and this is Grim.
I don't know what to think yet at this point.
That's fair.
Strewn with corpses.
Multitudes imagined.
Has
some
my
real.
attention. And I'm also feeling like this is a good follow-up to the Barari case because it seems like there's some delusions of grandeur involved.
Yes, very, very much. And I said yes in the same way that my son does, which is an emphatic nod of the head. Yes.
Yes.
Because he has now learned that he can express himself.
I love it. Express yourself. That's not right.
No.
Anyways, go ahead.
So that intro was a poem written by the subject of today's case,
Oh, boy.
Joseph Kallinger, on August 31st, 1982, titled Downhill.
Okay.
And it was very hard to read because I wrote it. Why I didn't just put it in a paragraph to read for the purposes of this podcast, I don't know. I kept it in its original form, which was very dramatic and poetic and different lines. And
I was going to say, because you wanted to break it up and have awkward pauses and not know what words to read together.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Exactly. Also, there is a line in here that I'm wondering if you picked up that made me think of, I believe, Friends, right? It was not a day, a week, or even a year.
Oh, it didn't. No, that didn't register to me.
It's all I could think when I read that. Okay. Good job. You got those number claps, right?
Yes.
Okay, so funny enough, this case was a suggestion from my very own husband.
Oh, wow.
And we can keep the shout out real short because he doesn't listen
He's
to Grim.
never
so
going to hear it.
Know. He did read some of my notes and then he said, I don't want to read all that. And I said, that's fair. You could listen.
Oh, yeah, but he won't.
No, that's okay. Love you. Okay. Okay. For my source, speaking of reading, my primary book, see, that was the whole first page was that book.
Wow.
Was that poem. My primary source was the book, The Shoemaker by Flora Schreiber, the author of Sybil, which was the woman possessed with 16 personalities. Ooh. And that is another obsession of mine. I've had that book for a long time and read it several times. I suspect that'll be a Peabody for me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just on your bookshelf before we had a true crime podcast.
Yes, it was. Yep. And it's not, that one's like, that's why those are good for Peabodies, because that's not really true crime, but it's super interesting.
It is very interesting.
And I have found if it's a thing that I'm interested in, most of our gremlins are also interested.
Yes.
So,
They are one with us.
Yes, we're so sorry. We love you. Are you ready to get into it?
What about Patreon shoutouts?
Oh, did you want to do that as part of like the thing that we do every time? And I just went right past it to tell you about my source.
I thought that it would be good if maybe we did that.
The one person who commented was like, can you please skip it? It was like, thank God they finally did it. We're so sorry.
Just kidding.
Just kidding. Yeah, I would love to do Patreon shoutouts. Okay, let's start with Heather B.
Heather B.
We love you.
We love you. Well, I mean,
Thank
I
you.
love you. Laura.
Heather.
Yeah, Heather. Laura wanted to skip right over you, but
I'm Heather.
I love you, Heather B.
Here with my best friend. Bess. Bess is our next one.
We love you so much.
This is a very unhinged but very short Patreon shout out. There's only a few.
We love you so much,
we
Bess.
Love you,
Thank you.
Bess. We love you, Heather B. We love you, Bess. Okay. Joel. We love you, Joel.
Woo, woo, woo.
Bess.
You're the best.
Woo, woo. We didn't give you any woo-woos. I'm so sorry. Woo, woo.
Woo,
Okay.
woo.
Okay. Joel, we got you. Okay. Brittany S.
Brittany
Woo, woo.
S.
We love you, Brittany.
We love you so
Thank
much.
you. Jacqueline. Thank you, Jacqueline.
Thank
we
you.
love you.
We love you so much. Are we yodeling?
You might be.
Okay.
Robert.
Robert, we love you so much.
We love you, Robert.
You're the
Thank
best.
you. All right, and that is actually it for today.
Oh, wow.
So it was just one line, little tucked into my notes here, and I just went right past it. I'm so sorry.
Okay.
Heather, Bess, Joel, Brittany, Jacqueline, and Robert, we love you.
We love you so much.
Thank you. We love all the rest of you, too, but you don't get a shout out yet. Okay.
Or you already had it because we love you so much.
Would you believe I had only 1 Celsius today?
Wow.
I know. Okay, so
I had
now,
1 too. Sorry, that
Okay.
was my brain computing how many Celsius I drank today.
Not enough. Not enough.
Okay.
Whew.
Now
I
let's
feel like we've
get
been
into
through
it.
life before we even got to the introduction, really.
That first page was longer than you thought it was.
Yeah.
All right.
All right,
now
20 minutes
get
in.
into it.
All right, let's
do
get into it. Okay. Joseph Kallinger was born on December 11th, 1936, to parents Judith Renner Skirty and Tony Patelli, parents who wouldn't remain in his life for long. Judith had endured hardship from childhood, battling polio, and spending years in foster care. As an adult, her struggles continued. A failed marriage, a daughter she was terrified of losing, and now an unplanned pregnancy by a married man. Fearing she'd lose custody of her daughter Muriel, Judith reluctantly placed her newborn son, Joseph, in an orphanage, believing adoption was her only choice. Judith was relieved to... I knew that TH was going to get me. She was relieved to learn that Joseph had been selected for adoption by a very nice family, quote, resolving her financial burden and closing a difficult chapter in her life. The very nice family was, of course, the Kallingers.
Okay.
This is an example of the part where I had like 3 pages worth of Judith's life. And I was like, maybe I need to shorten that a little bit for this not to be a 3-hour episode.
Yeah.
So you're welcome.
Judith.
If you want to learn any more about that, you could read the book because it has a lot more than 3 pages on her.
Okay.
All right. Stephen and Anna Kallinger emigrated from the Austro-Hungarian Empire to the United States in the 1920s, becoming naturalized citizens by 1930. Anna faced hardship after her father died in a work accident. She began working in a factory at age 12 and later emigrated in 1925 at 28, seeking a better life. In Philadelphia, words are hard, she worked in a restaurant kitchen as a waitress before marrying Stephen. He arrived in 1921 at 23. A skilled shoemaker, he came to assist his cousin Henry, who needed his help in business due to asthma. Both sought a fresh start and opportunities in America. Stephen and Anna were married on October 2nd, 1926 in Philadelphia, celebrated their 12th anniversary shortly before adopting Joe from St. Vincent's Orphanage. And Starin, why do I want all the words to be one? I just want them to be one.
They can't be one.
No, okay, I will separate them. Stephen, who was sterile, a fact known only to the couple and their doctor, had been encouraged to adopt years earlier, but delayed while building their shoe repair business. Fears of aging without an heir or support in old age eventually motivated them to act, which is fair, but maybe slightly selfish.
Yes.
I mean, that's not quite why I had kids.
I think the 20s was a different time.
That's also a fair statement. Yes. We're in the 40s, but yes.
He was born in the 20s.
Yeah, they came over, yeah. Well, Joseph was born 1936. They came over in the 20s.
Okay.
So,
I was like, I knew we were in generally the 1900s.
Okay, so speaking of dates, on January 9th, 1940, at ages 40 and also nearly 40, they finally became parents. So they finally made the decision to adopt.
Okay, I thought you were like, then they got pregnant miraculously, now they had an adopted child. And
it was miraculous, but they adopted Joseph.
Okay, lovely.
Judith had hoped Joe had found stability, but sadly she was wrong. While the Kallingers provided materially, emotionally, they were distant and harsh. They were especially strict when it came to Joe's body and anything they deemed sexual.
Oh, no.
When he was 5 and exploring his penis, as little boys do, the Kallingers overreacted, to say the least. When he went in for surgery to address a legitimate hernia, and I read on Wikipedia, which is not my primary source, and I don't rely on it, and then the source that it cited was sketchy, but it caught my attention. It said that the hernia was actually caused by abuse from Stephen and Anna, but I couldn't find any validation, so I don't know if that's true, but it's also very strange, I think,
for a 5-year-old.
Okay, so that's just an aside.
I think you can have, what are they called, inguinal hernias or
I don't know.
Umbilical hernias as well.
Oh, interesting. Maybe. I mean, he had a hard life early, so it's possible. Well, either way, Stephen and Anna told Joe that the doctor had fixed the hernia, but that they'd also fixed Joe's bird, which is what they called his penis.
What do you mean they fixed it?
Well, they wouldn't tell him exactly what the doctor did because it was secret. But they said it would stop the bird from getting hard and sticking out. And it also made it so the bird would stay small and never get big because the doctor got rid of the demon. They didn't touch it. They just told him that they did.
Mm-hmm. That is deep for a 5-year-old.
Oh, it's fucked up.
Yeah.
So Joe spent his childhood isolated, punished severely, for example, forced to kneel on sandpaper for minor offenses.
Oh my gosh.
And once Anna even struck him with a hammer just for wanting to join a school trip.
Oh no.
Joe became desperately lonely, stealing money to pay for companionship. Like he would pay kids to go to the movies with him.
Oh.
And when he was caught, Stephen and Anna brutally held his fingers over a gas stove burner, trying again to drive the demon out.
Ooh, this gives me like Child Called It
That
vibes.
is exactly what I thought. Yep.
I hate that.
Joe would often stop by abandoned train tracks when he would run errands. When he was 8, just 2 weeks after the hammer incident, he accidentally walked into or arrived at some slightly older boys from his school performing sexual acts on one another. So he walked in on them. They forced him at knife point to join.
Oh, no.
Joe's isolation led to darker obsessions, especially with knives. By adolescence, Joe could hardly separate violence from sexuality.
Oh, no.
At night, he would steal the Shoemaker knife that his father used, or stepfather used. Nope, adoptive father. Carving holes into his bedroom wall for sexual pleasure.
Oh.
Each time, he was both elated and ashamed. Like his stolen money, his secret was discovered. Stephen plastered over the hole, but Joe made another, and the cycle of discovery and punishment continued.
I'm equal parts disturbed and sad for Joe.
Oh, absolutely. Because he's clearly something funky going on. And, there's probably lots of other reasons, but being told that, like, your bird it's got the demon and all these.
They fucked him up. And then you also end up being
abused.
Assaulted at knife point. Like, it's all bad.
You'll see the theme of knives. So as he grew older, knives continued to be intertwined with his sexuality. He would masturbate while holding a knife or looking at one, escalating to the point where he could only climax by first slicing into a picture of a woman's stomach in a magazine.
Oh, no.
And when he got angry, he would stab the penises of the men in the pictures.
Oh, wow. So this is not
good. And he's young. I don't know exactly how old he was there, but it's still very young. But he had never actually used a knife on a real person until he was on the bus home. Exactly. We probably wouldn't be telling this story if it were different. He was on the bus ride home from camp, and the voice of the demon commanded him to cut someone. Spotting a boy his age, he befriended him and invited him to go fishing down by the river.
In a van.
Thank you.
Down by the river.
Joe pulled his knife and forced the boy to strip, intending to cut off the boy's penis. But at the last moment, Joe panicked and ran. Over the next few months, he repeated this 3 more times, each time fleeing before making the cut. Not with the same kid, different kids.
Oh, okay. I was like, this
Fool
poor
me
kid.
once.
Yeah.
With one victim, however, he did force oral sex on the boy, biting the boy's penis in a reenactment of his own childhood trauma. As Joe's mental state deteriorated, physical symptoms emerged: jerking movements, uncontrollable laughter, and vivid hallucinations.
Oh, wow.
At 15, he experienced a vision. He heard a voice, presumably that of God's, say, "Joe Kallinger, you have a special mission. Your orthopedic work already eases pain in the feet, but the feet hold the key to the brain. You must control the brain through the feet. This is your mission, my command to you. Use this method to heal yourself and heal mankind. You must heal and save."
Oh, no. It's so schizophrenic.
Yep. Yeah. There's something he's hearing.
Yeah.
He was captivated by this revelation, and he dove into his mission. This moment marked the first of over 40,000 orthopedic experiments that he would conduct between the ages of 15 and 36.
I don't know that I want to know about what orthopedic experiment entails.
It's actually not at all what you're thinking. He literally was putting, like, of course, these were the details that I was like, oh, I don't need all these, but I'll tell you. He was like putting wedges in heels because there is legitimacy, like in the heels of the shoes, that is,
okay,
because it changes the position of your back. So there is legitimacy. So I guess he did it once where he like put the wedge in his shoe and it relieved pain in his back. He was like, oh my God, it really does work.
Okay,
which is
so he
true.
wasn't like putting needles in his feet
not at all. He genuinely was like, I'm going to save the world through shoes.
Okay. I mean, it's a goal.
I know.
It's a goal.
Unfortunately, he was clearly not doing well. And at this point, when it could have been so impactful, no one intervened. When he was 14, Joe met Hilda, his first love. Just after his 16th birthday, shortly after dropping out of high school, they secretly married and moved out, determined to build a normal life.
Oh, wow.
But when their first child arrived, Hilda showed no interest in motherhood, probably because she was really young. And so she was neglecting their daughter. Arguments escalated, especially after Hilda became pregnant again and sought an abortion. This was something that Joe, despite his own darker impulses, refused to support. So that is where he drew the line.
Okay.
Fair enough. Soon after their second child was born, their marriage collapsed. Joe came home one night to find the children abandoned and neglected.
Oh, geez.
Devastated, he placed them in a temporary care and filed for divorce. He spiraled into loneliness, feeling abandoned once again.
Joe. Well, I feel bad for Joe.
You should at this point.
Okay.
At this point, Joe has been just not doing well.
Momentarily, I feel bad for Joe.
Honestly, spoiler alert, but we'll see how you feel at the end of the case. But I think it's going to be one of those where obviously we do not condone anything that I will tell you about. But you're just like, wow, that's tragic.
Right.
Across the board, I think is how you're going to feel.
Okay.
I think. We'll see.
I'll tell you.
I know you will. Just when Joe reached his lowest point, someone new entered his life. At a train station, his kids accidentally threw a ball toward a young woman named Betty, sparking a conversation that quickly blossomed into romance. Joe and Betty married in 1958, and at first their marriage seemed promising. But Joe's darkness soon returned. He became controlling, terrified Betty would abandon him. And when I say controlling, of course, I'm like, oh, I should have put this detail back in. He wouldn't let her leave the house without him. And literally put like bars on the window.
Too far.
Yep.
Too
definitely.
far, Joe.
His hallucinations worsened, compelling him to set fires repeatedly in their home, not to hurt anyone in the home, but just like the voice told him to burn the home. And he, of course, caused chaos and financial ruin in the process.
What was he setting on fire? Like the actual house?
Yes.
Or was he like this?
Oh, no, that actual house.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. He burned down like 2 houses.
Oh.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. No one, not trying to kill anyone. He just set the houses on fire.
Okay. I wasn't sure if it was that extreme or if it was like this paper plate is pissing me off. I need to light it on fire.
No, the whole
thing.
The like whole doused house. In gasoline. Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. Joe.
In 1967, Joe and Betty moved their family back into his adoptive parents' home. Returning to that house reopened old wounds. Joe withdrew into his obsessions, pacing the halls for hours and taking late-night walks, sometimes dragging his family along to avoid the loneliness. So it would be like midnight, and he's like, I'm going to go take a walk, and like his 5-year-old would go with him.
What year are we in? Nobody thought...
1967. Yeah.
Nobody thought like psychiatric help would be useful?
That's this is the millionth case we've done that's the same thing. Early on, he should have had psychiatric help, but his adoptive parents were half the problem, or more than half the problem.
Right.
And at this point, I mean, Betty was completely under his thumb. Nothing. She couldn't do anything. And the kids obviously couldn't do anything. His eccentricities escalated. He installed a 12-foot bowling lane in their bedroom, like in the house, compulsively rolling the ball before dawn and literally all weekend long, like nonstop.
What? Mm-hmm. Also, that's a really big bedroom. 12 feet?
I mean, 12 feet's not that big.
No? I'm spatially challenged.
Yeah, well, I would say like a normal bedroom is like 12 by 10 or something like that.
Why does that feel so big?
Well, because it's a bowling lane. You're like, that doesn't belong there.
Where did the bed go?
On the other side of the room. They're only like 3 feet wide, not even.
She's like, could you stop with the balls, Joe?
I knew I should have kept those details in the dimensions of the house. He collected piles of junk, bringing home strange objects for those endless experiments. Joe even woke Betty in the middle of the night, demanding she brew dozens of cups of tea at a time. So not just like, hey, can I have a cup of tea? Like dozens of cups of tea for him, one after another. So to say he had a bit of an obsessive personality is probably an understatement.
Betty, I need 3 gallons of green tea, stat.
I gotta
get
hit
my
these
balls.
710. Okay.
Oh my goodness.
The 710 split, I think. Okay. Joe fortified their home. I mentioned barricading the windows against imaginary threats. And across the street was like a elected official, and he thought that they were spying on him, even though it wasn't a state building. And he kept like throwing, I don't know if they were like pinballs or like metal balls at the windows and cracking them. And then they would board them up and then replace them. And he did this a bunch of times. He was off the deep end.
Okay.
Eventually, he secretly bought another house nearby and dug a 12-foot deep pit beneath its floorboards.
I hate that.
In this hidden space, he performed disturbing rituals involving masturbation and bizarre rites he believed granted him strength.
By himself?
At the time.
Okay.
Eventually, Joe involved his children, Michael, Joey, and Mary Jo, in his twisted world, bringing each child individually into his basement dungeon for what he ominously called lessons.
Oh, no.
He later said, "What was normal for others was abnormal for me. The abnormal was my normal. Delusions were real and reality was delusion." Which is where, like, the tragic side is just, I mean, he needed to be treated.
Right,
He was not well.
Right.
Briefly, in a disturbing attempt at normalcy, Joe shifted his obsession to his daughter, Mary Jo, treating her almost like a girlfriend. Not crossing the line, but he was taking her to dinners and giving her gifts and like almost wooing her. And for a few weeks, his hallucinations faded, and he no longer needed a knife near the bed with Betty.
Oh.
But soon he was horrified by his own behavior. Like, he reflected on what he was doing. He was like, this is fucked up. I need to stop it. But he sunk even deeper into darkness when he did that. Everything escalated violently in late 1972 when Mary Jo and Joey tried running away. Don't know why they might want to do that.
Poor kids.
Joe hunted them down, bringing them back at gunpoint. Once home, he sent Betty and the other children away. He handcuffed Joey to a chair, and Joe turned his fury on Mary Jo. For her punishment, he heated a metal spatula over a gas stove and then held it against her inner thigh.
Fuck.
He held it until it cooled. And then he did it again.
Oh my God.
And then he did it again, an unknown number of times. He says he chose this punishment so she wouldn't have sex with anyone.
Fuck.
For his son, Joe took the metal head of a hammer off and hit Joey all over with it.
The metal head or the
metal head
stick?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, that's bad. I don't know which one I'd
Both
take.
suck.
Yeah. Worse together, I think, though.
Yeah.
You know, because of the momentum and all that.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the children fled, understandably, and actually reported him, which props to them.
Good.
Like, the mental fortitude to do that. I don't know. Joe was arrested on January 30th, 1972.
Good.
Psychiatrists found him severely ill, recommending psychiatric evaluation in prison. At trial, Joe was convicted of cruelty and assault, but avoided jail time, receiving psychiatric probation instead. Back home, he then manipulated his children into recanting their statements, hoping to salvage his reputation, and they did. But Joe knew something had shifted permanently inside him. His orthopedic experiments had failed. His visions changed. God no longer urged him to heal humanity. Instead, Joe believed he was now commanded to destroy the world he had failed to save.
Oh no, go back to the shoes. Go back to the orthopedic shoes.
No, that's not what we're going to do.
Okay.
With this change, Joe decided he'd need a partner to carry out this dark new mission. He turned to his son, Michael, proposing a twisted criminal partnership. Michael agreed immediately, and at first, Joe had him commit robberies alone. Michael carried out about 24 of these break-ins, but in June 1974, Michael insisted his father start to join him. From that point forward, they robbed places together.
I wonder if Michael was so quick to agree because he figured that he would no longer be the butt of his father's attention.
I think that could
Is that
be
a
it.
phrase?
You can piece it together.
I was thinking like butt of his father's joke, and then the
center of attention, target of attention.
Something, yeah, just
we
put
picked up what you were putting down.
Okay.
We'll piece that together.
Okay, thank you so much.
I don't know if it was that or it was just like exposure. Because remember those rituals. So I didn't even mention, but he didn't do anything to the kids. Like, he was not abusing them in that way.
That was kind of an important fact.
Well, you didn't ask.
No, but I was picturing the worst.
No, so he wasn't, but I mean, he was abusing them in the sense that it is, of course, child
and they
abuse
were
if you're doing,
right?
Yeah, and it was all things centered around, like, it's all this sexuality and violence. So these kids grew up in this environment.
Okay, so you think Michael was just tainted at this point?
Very, very, very much.
Okay.
And I think the other kids really tried to get away from it. And Mary Jo had also a very different relationship with her father, because he was like, the reason Joe's attention went on her in that weird period was because she was kind and sweet to him. And like, there was just a different relationship. So no, Michael, unfortunately, I think was already kind of infected, if you will. As Joe's hallucinations intensified, the crimes grew darker. The pressure to carry out his mission, destroying literally billions of people, consumed him, and he knew he couldn't do it alone. So on July 7th, 1974, Joe approached Michael and openly said he wanted to kill someone that day. Without hesitation, Michael, who was only 12,
What?
agreed.
I was thinking Michael was much older than 12.
I know. Yep, that was also an important part.
Wow.
At around 3 o'clock that afternoon, they wandered through the neighborhood, unsure of exactly what or who they were looking for. Soon they found a young boy, about 9 years old, standing alone, playing with a lighter.
What's he doing with a lighter?
It's the 70s.
What's going on in this story?
He's just got a lighter. He's playing with it, waiting for his parents to pick him up or something like that.
Okay.
He's not doing anything. They struck up a conversation, learning his name was Jose Calazo. Joe told Jose they needed help moving boxes. Jose hesitated, mentioning he had to be home by 9. But Joe and Michael assured him he would be, and Jose trustingly agreed, following them down the street. Joe said he knew they weren't that far away from an abandoned factory and decided that was where they were going to kill Jose. All the lights were off when they went in, and they borrowed Jose's lighter. Jose began to realize what was happening, and in a scared voice said he had to be home by 9. There was no one there to hear him. They walked up rusty steel steps to a metal landing. Joe and Michael stripped Jose naked and bound him on his hands and ankles with a section of cord they found from an old electric fan nearby. They gagged him, and then Michael sodomized him. And then, at Joe's command, Michael cut off Jose's penis.
Oh, no.
Joe took the penis as a trophy, and they didn't wait to see what happened, but somehow they knew that Jose had died. They left him there, taking his clothes. Joe later said he was disappointed because it had been too dark to see the blood. They walked back to the store, arriving at about 9 p.m. Before they said goodnight to each other, Joe told Michael he wanted to murder others, and Michael replied, "Good."
Okay. This case is way more fucked up than I thought it was going to be. And you were like, the Shoemaker. And I was like, how bad could that be? Like, there's shoes
And
involved.
you were worried it was just going to be needles and feet. No, it's penises being cut off.
Let's go back to the orthopedic experiments.
Yeah, we won't, though.
Okay.
I probably should have had a trigger warning on this, but I think at this point, if you're listening to Grimm, like, you can handle, like, I don't know. I'm making assumptions, but
every episode is triggering.
I kind of, I do try to do it if there's like a lot of detail. That's about as much detail as I'll get into. So
good. Okay.
I mean, there's more that happens, but on that note, on July 21st, 2 weeks after Joe and Michael killed Jose, Joe experienced another hallucination. This time, he saw a boy being thrown from a mountain, falling helplessly to his death. Then came the voice, God's voice, Joe believed, giving him a chilling new command. He had to kill his son, Joey.
Oh, no.
Joey had betrayed him by keeping diaries filled with hatred towards Joe, diaries that had even been used against him in the court during the child abuse case. The voice that instructed Joe said he would find the name of a high place nearby in a brochure next to his bed. When Joe looked, sure enough, there was a pamphlet about the Pennsylvania Grand Canyon, which I didn't know that existed.
Neither did I.
I didn't go and Google it because I was already at like a lot of pages of notes, so I didn't do that. Sorry.
Okay.
Joe gathered all 3 boys, Joey, Michael, and young Jimmy, and took them to the bus station, planning to carry out the divine order that day. But at the station, Joe began having second thoughts, stalling until they missed the bus. They tried catching another, but they missed that too. Improvising, Joe suggested going to explore some nearby mines instead. He figured if he couldn't push Joey off a mountain, perhaps a mine shaft would suffice. As they walked, he became increasingly uneasy with the idea, eventually settling on a smaller hill near the mines. Joe positioned Joey on a rock ledge, asking him to take his photo, while subtly drawing Jimmy away from danger. And you can almost tell, like, back to your point on do I feel bad for Joe or not? Like, obviously in the actual actions that are happening, of course not. But you can, like, hear it.
His conscience
he's literally battling
so hard to not let him do it.
1,000%. And he's like, he would describe it that, like, the vision would be there. And he would describe it as his cup was full, meaning not in that pleasant way we all say that, in the way of like he was ready to do the deed and murder and whatever. And then if the vision went away, he like basically sobered up and he was like, holy shit, no. And this would happen throughout when he was like attacking people. So you can almost see that happening. The vision was like there and forcing him along. And then he was like, wait, no, I don't want to murder my son. I'm going to miss the bus. So it is like, from that sense, super tragic.
Yes.
So Michael, sensing his father's hesitation, began throwing rocks at Joey, trying to get him to fall and waiting for Joe to give the final order. So Michael didn't have these same, at least not that I read, any of these same hallucinations. And he just had this like,
he was like, he was ready to go.
Like, yeah. And he actually got super mad each time when we go through the other things that happened. Like each time Joe wouldn't follow through with something, Michael would actually get really pissed and like degrade Joe because he's like, you can't even kill someone, you know?
Wow.
It's super fucked up.
Wow.
But Joe realized he couldn't go through with it. At the last moment, he called it off, instructing Joey to step down from the rock. Without another word, the four of them turned and silently walked back home. But soon another dark hallucination came. Joey was a heavy smoker. Joey was 13 at this point.
Oh, the 70s.
And Joe envisioned him catching fire while lighting a cigarette. He shared this idea with Michael, and together they planned a deadly scenario. They'd give Joey containers filled with gasoline and then wait until he lit a cigarette and ignited himself.
Oh my gosh.
To get Joey to go along with it, they told him they were going to light some nearby trailers on fire, like tractor trailer, empty trailers. Joe filled a large 5-gallon gasoline can and poured more into 3 empty half-gallon glass, like spring water bottles. Then he placed all of these containers into a large grocery cart. I just have this vision of like Joey with the cigarette hanging out of his mouth, like trucking along with the grocery cart.
Yeah, large gasoline tanks.
Joey was oblivious to the danger, eagerly going along with Michael to the trailers while Joe stayed home. When they reached them, Michael instructed Joey to climb inside with the gasoline. Michael closed the door behind him, claiming he was going to go get their father, but instead jammed it shut before walking away to join Joe. Father and son sat watching from a distance and waited quietly until they saw smoke rising. Michael, satisfied, said, "Good, he's dead." Joe nodded, believing it was done. But a short time later, the door swung open and Joey, alive, walked back home. He explained that he had spilled gasoline all over the trailer floor, and then, as they'd hoped, he had carelessly dropped his lit cigarette, starting the fire earlier than intended. The flames quickly reached his pants, causing him to panic, and in sheer terror, he just flung himself against the jammed door, forcing it to open just in time to escape.
Oh, wow.
So once again, Joe's dark mission had failed.
It wasn't Joey's time.
Yet.
Okay. But it wasn't his time then.
That time, or the time before, time before.
He has survived thus far.
Thus far. Ever persistent, on Sunday, July 28th, 1974, Joe was napping when the voice startled him awake around 3 p.m., repeating its order: take Joey to the Grand Canyon and kill him. Joe gathered Mike and Joey, but at the bus terminal, once again, he changed his mind. The voice quickly offered an alternative. A building nearby was under construction, and it was a perfect place to stage an accident during a photo shoot. They went, and Joe instructed Joey to lie face down on scaffolding. So they went in to this building. Oh no, sorry. I'm ahead of myself.
Oh, okay.
I thought I left out details, and I was like, oh my God, these are really important details, but I didn't, because I forgot okay. I'm just going to tell you my notes as I wrote them because they were correct.
That seems like a good way to do it.
Sorry, I've gone off script a couple times here telling you details, and I was like ready to do it again, but I don't need to do that. Okay. So they go to, you're ready. So they go to this building under construction, and Joe instructed Joey to lie face down on some scaffolding high above the ground. But again, he intended to kill him, but Joe couldn't go through with it. So quietly they went home, and Joe had just not let the idea go yet. So this is like the third time that he's trying to kill him.
I can't believe that Michael hasn't just like walked up and like punted him into a ravine.
I think he literally wanted to, but he's got this weird, even though he would, like I said, degrade Joe, he also had this weird reverence for him and respect. Yeah.
Well, because he wasn't hearing the voices that were giving the commands.
That's true.
His father was the key.
Yeah. Michael was just on board for the murder.
Yeah.
So later that same evening, Joe took Mike and Joey out for dinner, intending to try the same plan afterwards. When Joey asked for money for the jukebox, Joe hesitated, but Mike whispered, "Come on, it's his last time."
Oh.
This part's really sad. Joey played his favorite song, Seasons in the Sun. When the lyrics said, "Goodbye, Papa, please pray for me. I was the black sheep of the family," Joey quietly said, "That's me. I'm the black sheep."
Oh.
So sad. After dinner, Joe suggested they go take more pictures. They walked back to the abandoned construction site. In the back room of one building, Joey spotted an iron door leading to a circular steel staircase going underground. I would die at that, actually. But Joey eagerly descended first, thinking that they were exploring. These were all the details I was so worried about making sure that you had. They're really important. Soon they reached an area with standing water.
Oh no.
Joey, still excited, said he wanted to check it out and wade into it, which is already so gross.
I hate
but
that journey for him.
13-year-old though, right? Still unsuspecting, thinking they were staging photos, Joey willingly allowed Joe and Mike to chain him to a ladder near the water's edge. Without warning, Joe and Mike shoved the ladder into the water, trapping Joey underwater, chained and helpless. They watched in silence with their flashlights as Joey struggled until he finally went still. Joe felt a twisted mix of regret and conviction. It was a sacrifice he believed necessary. As they emerged into daylight, Joe felt strangely disconnected from reality. You don't say.
Yeah.
But back home, Joe showered as if nothing had happened. Betty, completely unaware, called up to him asking if he still planned to take everyone out to dinner, thinking he'd been home all afternoon. Joe responded casually that they'd better wait until Joey returned. At 11 p.m. that night, Joe finally called the police and reported Joey missing. Every morning for the next 2 weeks before opening his shop, Joe would take Mike to return to the demolition site, pretending to search for Joey as if they hadn't been there when he vanished. So yet another piece of detail that I can't get out of my brain, but isn't on the paper. Joe completely dissociated from that murder.
Right.
Because I think it really fucked him up. I don't think he actually wanted to murder his son. And so he he just shoved it. Ooh, I hit my headphones when I did that. He just shoved it somewhere in the back of his brain. And I think he genuinely went looking for him.
Did they leave the body there?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh.
And on August 9th, Joey's body was discovered, but unidentified. The cause and manner of death were originally listed as undetermined, though the police obviously suspected foul play. On August 12th, a homicide detective suggested that the body was likely Joey's because they knew he was missing. And Joe himself identified his son's remains without a trace of guilt or acknowledgement. Most assumed Joey had fallen victim to some sketchy friends that he had, but actually the Philadelphia police quietly suspected Joe himself. They just had no proof and obviously never considered Michael to be involved.
Oh, yeah.
However, on September 26th, 1974, Joe was arrested without warning. The police openly admitted they had no warrant, but took him anyway. Joe immediately thought this was actually retaliation. Again, complete denial about Joey's murder. After the earlier child abuse charges, he had filed a lawsuit back against the police, and now he felt sure they were coming after him for revenge. Just in complete denial about the fact that it could be related to the murder of his son.
Right.
Lieutenant James O'Neill, a detective investigating Joey's suspicious death, believed a man capable of abusing his children might also be capable of killing them. He'd never bought Joe's innocent act, and now the investigation has circled back to Joe himself. I have to call out that Marina is attempting to make Finney talk for all of you, and I just want to appreciate the irony that when I don't want him to talk, he's so loud, and now we're inviting him into the conversation, and he has nothing to say.
No, he doesn't.
God damn it, Finney. Okay. Lieutenant O'Neill had another reason to be suspicious. Can you guess why he might be suspicious of Joe? What's our favorite topic? Well, that too. But what's our favorite topic? What's the only certainties in life?
Death and taxes.
Right. Joe had recently taken out nearly $70,000 in life insurance policies on Joey, a staggering amount that caught police attention.
Yeah.
The money, combined with Joe's troubled history, had put him squarely in their crosshairs, but there just wasn't enough evidence to convict him, and he was released.
Did you see the hamster running on the wheel, too?
Yes, I did. I was
brain?
like, come on, buddy. Come on. You can do it.
Yeah, that was tough.
It's okay. Hey, I had a rough start through this case, and I feel like I've picked up steam, so there's hope for you too.
Yes,
you know?
All right.
By late 1974, speaking of picking up steam, Joe's visions had become increasingly bizarre and dangerous. On November 22nd of that year, Joe heard the voice again. His seventh child, Bonnie, was now 15 months, and she had been born with sores on her body.
Seventh?
Yeah, because I don't know if I can list them all, but it was like Michael, Joey, Jimmy, Mary Jo, Annie, and Stephen from his first marriage. So that's 5, and I'm missing somebody.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Bonnie had sores?
Yes, she was born with sores on her body.
Okay.
I had a whole section in here about all the medical details, and I was like, Laura, pick your details here. A hallucination instructed Joe that Bonnie's skin could only be healed by mixing a woman's vaginal fluid, his own semen, and perfume, and then applying this mixture to her sores.
No. Those things don't belong in open wounds.
No, they don't.
Oh, no.
Determined to fulfill this twisted command, Joe and Michael traveled by train to Camden, New Jersey, searching for a vulnerable target. First, they broke into the home of Joan Carty, after Michael approached under the guise of selling tie clips, which was a very clever way, they said, to make sure no men were present. So they'd be like, ma'am, do you have anyone that wants to buy tie clips? I was like, that is so creative. Anyway, I just had to mention that detail.
I hate it when they're smart.
When the coast was clear, they entered her home, stripped her, tied her up, and Joe prepared himself to assault her. But again, when the vision abruptly ended, he immediately lost his ability to perform. Instead, he used his fingers, wearing gloves, got to be sterile here, to obtain what he thought he needed. Back home, Joe mixed the fluid with perfume and his own semen and applied it to Bonnie's skin.
Oh my gosh.
So gross. Unsurprisingly, the ritual failed, and after recognizing this failure, Joe was consumed by frustration and anger, not at Bonnie, of course, but at himself. Unable to heal his daughter, Joe declared to Michael that their next act, set for December 3rd, 1974, would end in murder. Indeed, on that day, around 10 a.m., Joe and Michael took a train to Susquehanna, Pennsylvania. They spotted a house and watched it carefully, waiting until the woman inside finally left. After she drove off, they quietly broke in and hid, waiting patiently for her return.
I hate that.
Around 11:30 a.m., Helen Bogan walked into her home, arms filled with packages, completely unaware she wasn't alone. Joe grabbed her immediately, forcing her to the floor. He pressed a butcher knife to her cheek and warned softly, "If you scream, you're dead."
My worst nightmare.
Well, no, I think a needle would do you in more so.
Oh, that too. Any sharp objects, really.
Yeah. A shank, perhaps?
Or a shiv.
Or a homemade knife. Terrified but composed, she begged him to just take what he wanted and leave. Guests were arriving soon for a bridge luncheon.
Oh, jeez.
Joe calmly asked how many guests were coming, and she answered 3. This information didn't deter Joe. With Michael's help, Joe brought Helen upstairs, binding her to an overturned metal bed frame. I'm sure now Finney has something to say. He covered her eyes, placed cotton soaked with lighter fluid on them, and prepared to ignite it just as he'd seen in his latest vision.
What the fuck, Joe?
But again, at the last moment, his hallucination abruptly vanished and he lost his nerve.
Thank goodness.
Then the doorbell rang, signaling the arrival of Helen's guests for their bridge luncheon. Joe calmly opened the door for the first guest, Ethel Cohen, who is exactly who I expect at a bridge luncheon.
Ethel.
And yes, the TH is
really
struggling.
They really get you.
No offense to anyone with a lisp. Anyway. Before she could react, he pushed her against the wall, warning her not to scream. Upstairs, he restrained her wrists with wire from a coat hanger. When she pleaded with him not to gag her, saying she had difficulty breathing through her nose, Joe surprisingly relented.
Oh.
The second guest, Thelma, why are all the THs?
I don't know.
Thelma Sudin arrived moments later. Joe repeated the same steps, pulling her inside, warning her into silence, and restraining her with the coat hanger wire. Though frightened, she cooperated, asking only that her glasses remain untouched.
Oh.
A request that Joe also granted.
Who's the third guest? The Lula?
No. But it was Birdie. I was trying to think of. What is that? Bernie, Bethel. I'm okay.
Do you smell toast?
No. I was trying to think of another old lady name and I failed. That's all.
Gertie?
Yeah.
Gertrude?
That's not the name though.
Okay.
Now that we've completely lost our gremlins on what's happening, Michael, however, speaking of lost patience, and roughly barricaded her into a closet. So that is that's the most he would do. He was impatient at Joe's slowness. But Joe reprimanded him, calling the women intelligent and saying they deserved better treatment. So it makes no sense, which I guess...
inconsistent.
Yeah. Well, he's inconsistent. He's consistent about some things. Like there were like these small decencies he allowed, but then these big things. It's kind of like early on with Hilda wanting the abortion, and he was like, no, not that. And it's like, but you want to stab women.
Right. You want to kill people. Mm-hmm.
When the final guest, Anna Pearl Frankston, arrived, Joe held his hands tightly over her eyes as he led her upstairs, warning her about the knife he'd use if she resisted. At the top of the stairs, the hallucination, which had temporarily subsided, returned in full force. Joe now clearly saw the dark figure, a powerful double he called the Supreme Power, urging him towards greater violence. He took Anna Pearl inside, assured her he wouldn't harm her friends, and showed her that they were still alive, though restrained, and then he put her on the floor and bound her as he had the others. Momentarily alone in the master bedroom, Joe examined the valuables Michael had gathered, because of course they were robbing while they were doing all of this. Jewelry and cash worth around $20,000, which was actually quite significant.
Yeah.
But having lost the will for further violence, Joe and Michael left with the loot, leaving their terrified victims tied up but physically unharmed. Can you imagine being these women? You think,
No.
I mean, you're obviously relieved, but it must take so much time because you're just like, are they gone for good?
Yes.
I mean, what a wild thing.
It would take years off your life. Waiting
without
for
a
them
doubt.
to return.
And they don't have many years left.
I know.
don't think.
That's
I mean,
awful.
I actually don't know how old they were.
Your bridge club.
I know. Very sad. And they just arrived one by one for their little lunch. And it just, in all seriousness, is like horrible. And it's just, anyway. So for a brief moment, it seemed Joe had regained some control. After the attack on the women, the dark impulses quieted. But on December 10th, just 15 days before Christmas, the visions returned. That day, Joe and Michael broke into a home in Homeland Road, an upscale neighborhood in Susquehanna. Inside, they found Pamela Jaski alone. Joe bound and blindfolded her, intending to kill her. But at the last moment, something changed his mind. Instead of murdering her, he now decided he wanted sex. He put a gun to her head and forced her to perform oral sex before abruptly leaving.
For how violent his actions are, his body count is not that high.
It's not because it's because it's completely driven by this hallucination and otherworldly, like supreme divine power thing. And if it's not pushing him, like mentally, he doesn't want to do it.
Is he diagnosed in the end? Like, do you get into that?
I didn't get into deeply. I didn't get into details on what he was diagnosed with. Actually, funny enough, the book does get into like deep analysis on it because the author Flora is like, her whole thing is the psychiatric side of it. So it's actually, if you are interested in that, for sure read that, because that's why this would have been like, it was like 40 pages.
Is it schizophrenia?
No, it was something like they basically. I don't think they actually diagnosed him because it was, spoiler, he does go to trial. But it was back and forth on like whether he was insane or not. And they like couldn't get one opinion. And they actually looked at whether it was like a physical disease that he had a problem with. So
this just brings me back to the last case. Where does faith end and delusion begin? And it's one of those, like, you know it when you see it. Like this is faithful delusion.
Oh,
like this
absolutely.
Supreme being, like these are for sure delusions.
And I don't even think it was like a question of can I follow? I think he like was compelled to follow.
Wow.
So their violence paused briefly through the holiday season, but by January 6th, 1975, Joe and Michael were back at it, this time targeting a woman in Dumont, New Jersey. They broke into the home of Mary Rudolph and restrained her, planning initially to kill her. Same script. But again, Joe changed his mind, choosing again to sexually assault her. He held her at gunpoint and again forced oral sex. Once done, he and Michael left the scene, again leaving their victim alive but traumatized.
Are they robbing the house?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So at least they got something out of it,
I know.
you know?
Like, at least.
But this is where Michael each time was like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, I want to murder someone. And mind you, this kid is like 14 at this point.
Yes, I have not forgotten.
With each attack, Joe felt increasingly detached. He knew the line between his fantasies and reality was wearing dangerously thin, and that line was about to disappear completely. On January 8th, 1975, Joe and Michael broke into a house in Leonia, Leonia? I don't know how to pronounce that, actually. I didn't say that one out loud. Leonia?
I think it's Leonia.
Okay. Anyway, it's in New Jersey.
People are like, it's Leonia.
Yeah. Well,
that sounds right.
That sounds actually better, but I'm from like the Massachusetts area where like we have Leominster, and that is not how it's spelled. So
Peabody.
Peabody, yep. Inside were sisters Randy and Retta, their bedridden grandmother, and a young boy, the son of one of the sisters. Their grandfather was in the hospital suffering from heart problems. Before Joe and Michael could act, 3 more people arrived unexpectedly. 2 women, 1 older and 1 younger, and a large man. Joe and Mike quickly tied up and blindfolded everyone. But as they prepared to deal with the large man, yet another person arrived. Her name was Maria Fashing. Maria was known amongst her friends as a fierce advocate, a strong, vocal woman who had never backed down from bullies and despised any form of cruelty. She saw herself as a free spirit, rescuing injured animals and standing up for anyone vulnerable or mistreated.
Ooh, she lit up a room.
This does not bode well for her if I'm giving you all these details.
By the way, did you just notice I keep getting closer and closer to you and my neck is like crumbling into my chest? I just had to sit up straight.
We have several pages left. Okay. So sorry. Joe saw, and my creaky bones are making, I keep lifting them off the table, but my creaky bones
are very noisy.
So sorry. Joe saw the basement as the ideal place to carry out the killings. He started by taking the large man downstairs, securing him tightly to a pipe. But Joe decided he simply couldn't kill him. Instead, he would destroy the man's penis. So remember back what he did with the magazines?
Yes.
That was like, he thought he was supposed to kill people through their sexual organs was his thing. That checks out with everything that he's done.
But God told him about the feet and the brain, so you'd think that he'd be chopping off their feet.
Yeah, no, that's how you heal and save them.
Oh, okay, but the penis is how they die.
Evidently.
Gotcha.
Yes.
All right.
But Joe decided he needed a delegate, someone else to do this gruesome act for him, and he chose Maria. Dragging her down to the basement, Joe ordered Maria to bite off the man's penis.
Oh, no.
Now, they also all knew each other, like they were all like going to hang out at this house.
Oh, no.
She refused, defiant and brave, saying she'd rather die. Without hesitation, Joe stabbed her violently in the neck.
Ugh.
His visions and voices urged him onward, and he stabbed her repeatedly. Suddenly, Michael shouted from upstairs. One of the women had managed to free herself, had run outside, and was screaming for help.
Good.
Basically, Michael was like, we got to get the fuck out of here.
Yeah.
Panicked, Joe left Maria choking on her own blood and ran. Terrified of being caught, Joe desperately tried to discard anything that could link him to the crime, his knife, the gun, even his blood-stained clothing. Michael tried to stop him, warning him that leaving evidence would get them caught, which, again, this kid's like 13, 14 years old.
Yeah,
like,
really.
Being the conscience. But Joe was too frantic to listen. Before reaching home, he threw away his bloody shirt, forgetting it bore the name Kallinger, for the laundry. Mm-hmm. They made it back home, Joe consumed with frustration and shame over yet another failed attempt to fulfill his twisted vision.
Okay, but how relieved is the guy in the basement who did not get his penis bit off?
Probably relieved, but he also watched someone get stabbed to death
it's
in
not
front of
great.
him.
It's not great, but I'm just saying he's probably pretty
I know,
relieved.
Finny. I know.
It's...
Yeah,
I feel the same.
And then same with the women and like the kid. He really wanted nothing to do with the young kid. Like he just like put him in another room. Wanted nothing to do with the grandma. Like really just needed. But he in general wanted to just kill everyone on Earth. Was his actual directive.
He's not doing a good job.
No, he's not. Literally, that's what the book. So I didn't mention that the book is. I know there's so many things to tell you. But Flora interviewed Joe in prison.
Oh.
So this is all like really detail, but some of it, like these are all facts. These are things that happen, but there's additional detail about like Joe's state of mind and his opinion and all that.
Can I borrow this book?
It's fantastic.
It sounds really good. You didn't torture me enough with the case.
I was like, I can't do another 2-parter, but literally, so I would say my average case is like, I don't know, 10 to 15 pages. And this was like 35 pages. And I was like, I can't do it in two parts. So maybe I'll do, I don't know, I can't really do a Peabody with like miscellaneous details, but maybe the psychiatric side I will.
It's very interesting.
I'm so glad. Okay. So though Joe didn't believe it, Maria had in fact died. So Joe didn't think so because he last saw her alive. I mean,
stabbed her in the neck a bunch of times.
And she was choking on her own blood.
Yeah.
Yep. Police arrived swiftly. Many of them had actually known Maria personally, like since she was a little girl. Her father had been an officer himself.
Oh my gosh.
Soon, a crucial lead appeared. A woman reported seeing two suspicious individuals washing themselves off in a puddle near a baseball field, and then she'd even seen them discarding bloody clothing. On January 17th, 1975, the police arrived at Joe's door. They were like, oh, Kallinger. Okay. That also checks out with your very long, very concerning rap sheet. Joe and Michael were inside sorting stolen coins. When Betty demanded a warrant, the officers ignored her, pushing past and storming inside. Joe and Michael bolted, but there was nowhere left to run.
Wait, what was on his rap sheet?
Well, I mean, he had been arrested for the child abuse.
Yes.
And then he had been arrested for, like, in connection with Joey's murder, but he wasn't charged.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yep.
Gotcha.
And also, like, yet again, all of those fires, like, he got
Was he
in trouble.
charged with arson?
Some of it, he avoided jail time, but, like, there was also insurance, of course,
okay.
associated with it. There were construction problems with it. Like, so basically, he was a known thing.
Okay.
You know.
Sorry to interrupt. So
No,
where
that's
something
okay.
dramatic just happened?
Well, Michael and Joe tried to run away from the police, but they couldn't.
Okay.
They got caught.
Thank you.
Officers from 3 states and the FBI burst in, swiftly arresting both father and son on multiple charges, including kidnapping and robbery. The blood-stained shirt Joe had abandoned proved to be their undoing. It was, of course, traced back to him through a Philadelphia dry cleaner.
Oh.
After their arrest, Michael was placed in the Lancaster detention home. The court and psychologists examining him felt cautiously optimistic. Michael was still young, and authorities believed he might be salvageable.
No.
Psychological evaluations painted him as rebellious and hostile, but ultimately manageable, provided he received long-term therapy.
No. Michael's brain is foobar.
I definitely think so. But by September 1976, Michael had made significant progress, and authorities decided he was ready to transition out of institutional care, placing him with foster parents, who were a relative of Betty. This foster family had actually long been concerned about the Kallingers, especially Michael. Yep. And wanted to help him turn his life around. Still, Michael had serious charges hanging over him from the crimes he committed with his father.
Yeah.
New Jersey authorities charged him with 2 armed robberies and the murder of Maria Fashing, which I thought was interesting. Flora's book didn't get into these details, but like he was the one charged with Maria's death, which I thought was interesting. At a closed hearing on January 26, 1979, Michael pled guilty to the robbery charges in exchange for dismissal of the murder charge, which seems like a very lopsided trade to me.
Something must have been up with the murder charge.
Maybe.
'Cause that's weird.
Yeah, very. The prosecutor argued strongly against incarceration, emphasizing Michael's remarkable rehabilitation. To institutionalize him again would undo all the good that's been accomplished.
And he lived happily ever after.
Well, okay, so what's interesting about this is there's like tremendous detail in this book. And then I went on the good old interwebs, because this book was written in 1982, so I was like, I kind of need some details since then. There is like next to nothing. There's like one kind of uncorroborated, I got close, case or source. And like, so I didn't want to pull detail from that. And I could not find anything on Michael, which I guess is good.
I was going to say that leads me to believe that he led a relatively crime-free life, or he changed his name because he would be in the news.
So the court had agreed that they wanted to let him go. So he was placed on probation under Pennsylvania's supervision until December 25th, 1982, his 21st birthday. With careful optimism, authorities returned Michael to his foster parents, hoping that the progress he'd made would continue and that he'd leave behind the violent legacy of his father. But as I said, I assume so. I mean, for sure, if he had, so then my thought was, well, that's if he's caught, or are we going to find out about this serial killer? Like, genuinely, I don't know.
Right.
Or he's living a perfectly quiet, like maybe he really was rehabilitated. I don't know. Very interesting. I don't know.
That's my thoughtful commentary on that.
I appreciate that. Okay, as for Joe, on January 20th, 1975, 2 days after arriving at the Dauphin County Jail, gotta be careful there, Joe was officially charged in New Jersey. He was charged with the murder of Maria as well, but I just thought it was weird that they charged.
It's probably like
But
a
I guess
felony
they don't
murder.
know. Oh, Yeah. Oh, I learned all about that. I listened and I learned. Okay, thanks. As well as 2 armed robberies, one in Dumont and another in Leonia. Leonia, wherever that was.
Wherever. They know what we're talking about.
Just a week later, I'm so sorry. You're so close to us in Jersey. I just don't know how to pronounce it, okay? Just a week later, at a police lineup, 18 witnesses from 3 different states identified Joe and Michael in connection with multiple crimes. Joe, however, was bewildered. He knew he had attacked Maria, but still believed she was alive when they fled the scene. So in his mind, these new charges were purely revenge from the police department for those lawsuits way back when after the child abuse case.
He's like, I'm being set up.
Literally. He thought it was a whole thing. Joe's first trial for robbery, burglary, and false imprisonment charges began on June 19th, 1975. His defense was built around his mental illness. That makes sense. Joe's lawyers argued he wasn't responsible because he was under the influence, though, of toxic chemicals he had inhaled daily while working in his poorly ventilated shop. Betty and other witnesses testified about his hallucinations and strange behavior, even detailing the voices commanding him to violence. So they blamed it on that.
Okay,
Yep.
but it could be a touch of psychological issues and chemical
Enhanced
poisoning. Yeah.
But the trial ended abruptly in a mistrial when a court employee improperly discussed Joe's case with sequestered jurors, openly voicing her belief in his guilt. A second trial started soon afterwards on October 7th. This time, Joe himself took the stand. I don't know who allowed that. His testimony was bizarre. He calmly told the court that he was 1,000 years old. He had once been a butterfly, and he regularly spoke directly with God.
And they were like, not guilty by reason of insanity?
You would think, nope. So I think that there was a lot of, this was not in the book, this is just my opinion, because the jury deliberated less than an hour before finding Joe guilty on all 9 counts. And I think that they just were disgusted by like everything he'd done and who he was, and like just wanted to pin something, like find, justice, even though it might not have been.
Or they could have thought that he was playing it up at that point, because he would have been evaluated to see if he was competent to stand trial. So
you're right.
They might have established that he was competent, and they just didn't believe his testimony.
It was so crazy.
Yeah.
That maybe they were like, he's clearly making that up. That's
yes.
actually, I bet that's right. The judge was particularly blunt at sentencing, saying you are an utterly vile and depraved individual, before sentencing him to between 30 and 80 years in prison just for that trial. While serving time for these crimes, Joe was transported to Bergen County Jail in Hackensack, New Jersey, to await trial for Maria's murder.
It's Hackensack.
I literally was thinking, I know how to pronounce those ones. Okay. That trial began in February 1976. Once again, Joe's mental state took center stage, with his defense team emphasizing the depth of his psychosis. His courtroom demeanor was so erratic and disturbing that psychiatrists finally declared him incompetent to stand trial on additional charges. Behind bars, Joe's behavior only worsened. Driven by hallucinations and paranoia, he repeatedly attempted suicide and even tried to set his cell on fire.
Oh my gosh.
Yet another trial awaited, this one for other crimes in Lindenwold, New Jersey.
I'm sorry, where is it?
Why? These are like not even hard. I get stressed. Lindenwold? I want to say world, but it's not a typo. Okay. Joe requested testing for Huntington's disease, suspecting it might explain his bizarre movements and behavior, but the court refused further delays. Though 2 specialists later determined Joe did not have Huntington's, they acknowledged the seriousness of his symptoms as genuine neurological disturbances. And I couldn't leave it at that and just accept that. I had to look up like all the symptoms and everything about Huntington's. It is super interesting. So Huntington's is a degenerative brain disorder that causes a loss of control over movement, cognition, and emotions. Symptoms include jerky, involuntary movements. Remember way back when he started that. Muscle stiffness, trouble with coordination, memory decline, mood swings, aggression, paranoia, and hallucinations. The disease progressively worsens, often leading to severe psychiatric disturbances and loss of impulse control, factors that could explain much of Joe's erratic and violent behavior.
That's very interesting. compared to what happened in this case.
Yeah, well, because it was also like we literally saw it escalating, and he was more and more detached from reality. So, I mean, it's science. They tested him. I don't know, but
wow.
So I thought that was interesting.
Oh, they tested him. He didn't have it.
That's what they said. Yep.
Okay.
No, this was the late 70s, so it's possible their testing wasn't advanced enough. Maybe he did. I don't know. I tried to not include all of that.
Okay.
Having been deemed competent now, the Lindenwold trial began so he was in psychiatric hold for a while, and then they finally decided, no, he's good now.
They fixed him.
Yeah. His trial began July 11th, 1977, and lasted 2 weeks. Again, Joe's behavior and mental instability overshadowed everything else. And despite this, the jury quickly found Joe guilty on charges including burglary, robbery, assault, and attempted rape. On July 22nd, 1977, Joe received yet another sentence, an additional 30 to 80 years stacked consecutively onto his existing sentences. So Joe remained in prison, quietly working as a shoemaker. It actually kind of worked out in the facility for about 3 years.
Forgot about the shoes.
Yeah, I know. You would think it was like a whole big thing. But in early 1978, he was reassigned to a sewing machine in the sewing factory. On March 15th, 1978, Joe was working alongside 23-year-old Earl Eller, an inmate serving a short sentence for burglary. Suddenly, Joe was overcome by a violent vision, another irresistible hallucination commanding him to kill. Without warning, he lunged at Earl, viciously strangling him and stabbing him 20 times with a pair of sewing scissors.
Oh my gosh.
And for my fellow sewers out there, you know those sewing scissors are impeccable. They are so sharp.
Super sharp.
So sharp. Don't touch my scissors. Okay.
I just had to replace mine and labeled fabric only because all of my other scissors had been used to cut everything and they would no longer cut fabric.
Yes. So I knew everyone would understand that.
Wow.
Earl collapsed, bleeding profusely. Guards quickly subdued Joe, and Earl was rushed to the hospital, clinging to life. Miraculously, he survived. Sadly, Joe himself had warned the prison that this would happen. On March 1st, 8th, and 9th, so this all happened on March 15th, so like the week before, he had sent notes asking for psychiatric help, specifically saying he was having the urge to kill in the sewing room.
Oh, okay, this is their fault.
Yep, and his warnings went ignored.
Wow.
But I think they were like, he was a problem child.
Right,
like,
right.
So I think they were just like, not fucking again, Kallinger, you know?
The boy who cried murder.
Yeah. Yes. That's a good title. Frustrated and tormented, Joe soon turned the violence inward again attempting suicide multiple times. He set fire to his cell, hoping the smoke would suffocate him, and each time the guards intervened, pulling Joe out alive. It seemed Joe couldn't escape, not from his demons, not from his hallucinations, and not even from himself.
Wow, Joe had a tough life.
He did. And he survived in prison very unhappily for nearly 20 more years until dying of heart failure on March 26, 1996, bringing an end to his tragic and violent story. He was 59 years old. Joe's passing marked the quiet final chapter of a man who once believed himself chosen by God, yet spent decades imprisoned by his own mind.
Wow.
So I have one little minor grim fact. So the book that I've mentioned many times, The Shoemaker by Flora Schreiber, after it was published, the families of Kallinger's victims sued to prevent Joe from profiting from the royalties. That's a Son of Sam thing, whatever, right? I think.
Is it Son of Sam?
I think so. I think that's what it mentioned. But initially, this lawsuit had actually devastating consequences for Flora, the author. She was left nearly $100,000 in personal debt, much of it from expenses incurred researching and writing the book.
Oh my gosh.
She had spent up to $1,200 each month. Remember, this is in like the late 70s, so we're talking quite a bit of money just to speak with Joe in prison over the course of several years.
Wow.
Thankfully, an appellate court later intervened, ruling that only Joe's personal royalties would go to the victims' families, not Flora's. So I thought that was interesting.
Wow.
Wow.
Poor Flora.
Yes. I want to go reread Sybil, and that will for sure be a Peabody because it's so interesting.
Yes, it is.
I'm sure. I mean, I don't know how my husband found this case because I had most definitely never heard of it. And there's really not a lot of information out there. But I'll maybe do a little more deep dive. I wonder if it's out there on some, like if it's studies for psychological cases or whatever. It's got to be because to your point, like what on earth, what happened?
Oh, I know.
I'll have to also reread the end of the book because I purposely didn't. I mean, she was focused on the psychiatry. So a lot of the book dives into a lot of that, but I don't know that it was ever like, it was a lot of hypothesizing. So that's why I didn't include a lot of that, but
it was very interesting.
yeah.
Well, thank your husband. That's his,
I will.
That's his one contribution.
Yeah. Besides, you know, yeah.
Being married to you.
Yeah. I was going to say that, but I was like, that's, you're welcome.
Yeah. That's a gift. That's a gift from you to him.
I guess my son, I'll take that. That's pretty great.
Okay. Yes.
You know.
Yeah.
Just kidding. Love you if you do listen to this. So anyway, I'm not done. I forgot I have the whole.
I wasn't sure if you had your socials like memorized because you closed the packet.
No,
and I was like, I think there's
wrong
more.
with me?
I don't know.
The Patreon shout outs at the beginning. Well, hey, if you're enjoying Grimm, make sure you're getting the most in between episodes. You can subscribe to our Patreon by searching Grimm, a true crime podcast on the Patreon app or website. Depending on the tier you choose, you'll get a shout out like the ones I almost skipped at the beginning. Access to monthly bonus episodes like the one about Jeannie, which is another like kind of psychological thing that was actually more language. Yeah. And maybe Sybil, we'll see. Or you can join our super, super awesome, I usually say supremely awesome, Discord server, which is so cool.
It's so cool.
Lots of cat pictures.
So many cat pictures.
So many. If you don't want the commitment, no judgment here. We're on Buy Me a Coffee. Visit buymeacoffee.com/grimcrimepodcast to contribute a one-time amount of your choosing. Make sure you follow us on our socials so you can stay up to date and check out episode pictures. You can find us on Instagram at Grim Crime Podcast, and on Facebook, just search Grimm, a true crime podcast. If you have case suggestions, you don't actually need to be married to me to tell me. You can message us on any of these platforms, and you do, and we have it in a giant spreadsheet, and we go through it. So
yes.
I also fear, maybe I said this one other time, but I also fear that our list is so long that by the time I get to them, I give the shout out. I'm like, this person probably doesn't even listen to Grimm anymore. But what are you going to do? I still give the shout out. You can also send us an email at grimcrimepodcast@gmail.com, and every approximately 2 years we'll respond. Wherever you do listen, please rate us, or even better, leave us a written review. Thank you for being here. Listen, learn, and stay alive until next time, because the future is grim.